Hey guys, welcome to The Called Entrepreneur, a podcast dedicated to those faithful men and women who are stepping out and making the transition from employee to entrepreneur. Our objective is to offer biblical wisdom, guidance, and even encouragement on that transition. The focus of building the business while also building the kingdom. So whether it's people going through their entrepreneurial highs, the lows, and everything in between, we want to help you. You may be a brand new business owner, a seasoned vet, or maybe somebody here just to grow and get better and improve their skill sets in growing a Matthew 6:33 business. Seek first the kingdom and his righteousness, and all things will be provided to you. Thanks for joining us. Let's jump into it. I'm excited about our guest today, Tanner Hawkins. He's going to talk about his journey. Tanner's a close friend of mine, incredible husband, great father to Avit, who's like a rising social media star, by the way.
Got to follow him.
And a great business leader, a six-figure earner as an entrepreneur. So let's dive in. So Tanner, before we jump into it, man, I'd love to hear your story. I was taking your pastime before an entrepreneur and in the transition you made.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. I've been running our business now for 9 years and started pretty young. I think I was 21 when I left my job and started, running things full time. But prior to that, was working at a gym and initially even kind of got into that setting. My wife, Maggie, she was a nurse. We had moved back to Dallas after school and I started working at the gym and I just thought, man, if I could learn the ropes here, I could kind of, get promoted up within the corporate gym world. But man, if I could learn enough about just the inner workings of it, maybe I could branch off and run like my own gym. And so, me and another buddy that had grown up together, that always been kind of a pipe dream of ours. We had went and talked to a local gym owner who had several locations from our hometown and asked him about, hey, there's this other small town gym and the owner, what would it take, do you think, for us to approach that guy about buying his gym? And he kind of walked us through numbers. And so we had done a lot of that stuff, taking it pretty seriously. But after being at the gym for a while, I got to kind of see behind the curtain and just thought, man, these aren't super profitable. There's a lot of overhead that goes into it. There's a ton of risk. A lot of them go under. Even the corporate ones go under, much less kind of the more locally owned ones. And so when I started to see that wasn't really going to help me, I didn't even want to win in that aspect of running a gym, then I didn't really have any reason to stay there as a career, because I saw the guys ahead of me that had made it a career, the guys that, again, were, quote, winning. And I felt like they had terrible family lives. They were working 6 days a week. And they were making decent money, not really life-changing money. Just, they were making okay money. But I felt like they had less time than other people I knew. And so I thought, well, that wasn't really a trade-off worth making. And so that's when I kind of started trying to figure out, what am I going to do next? And just was sort of at a pivotal moment of trying to figure out how something where I could have a lot more control of both, just my time, my schedule, but also still feel like we could provide and we could have more options and stuff like that.
And Maggie was working at this time?
Yeah. So she's at the hospital. I'm at the gym. And so when I kind of decided to make the move of, starting up in, finance and figuring out how to run an agency, we had been living below our means, already been living on one income. So we just felt like we were in a situation where we had the savings and we could kind of, we could afford for me to give this the learning curve it needed to do it right, we felt like, as long as we just kind of stayed responsible.
Yeah.
So
let me ask you this, and it may have been before when you saw behind the scenes at the gym, like you mentioned. One thing I think we've seen over the years is people, when they make that decision to really radically pursue entrepreneurship, there's a defining moment at some point. Mm-hmm. Again, maybe that was before, but would you say when you started taking that path and that journey, was there a certain situation or a moment you said, this is it, this is my defining moment? So,
yeah, it actually came, I've got two that I can kind of think back to, and they came honestly a few years in. And so our first few years, and this is not unique to entrepreneurship journey, is, things weren't going my way. And so I think entrepreneurship from the outside is like, man, if everything goes right, it'll be awesome. And it's starting to realize that very little of it goes right, actually.
Yeah.
And so the first few years were, slugfest. And so The first kind of defining moment is we were so broke, and Maggie was working extra shifts at the hospital, and I was trying to figure out how to, just make some money and keep us going. And I had taken over the finances, where I was the one kind of managing the bills and stuff like that. And Maggie had done that previously, but not because it was what she even wanted to do. She just worried about it more than I worried about it. So it kind of just fell on her naturally. But we ended up kind of taking over where I was doing it. And the first couple months, I didn't know how to pay the electric bill. I didn't know how to log into, what account.
Because you guys were newlyweds.
Yeah. Still in our first, probably second, third year of marriage. And it was just stressing Maggie out, having to watch the money go out and not as much of it come back in. And so I took it over. And, just within that first month or two, it was just kind of like shock of, I forgot to pay this, or man, we got overdrafted again. And there was a moment where I had to sell a couple things just that were sitting around our house. Like an old iPad and a dresser that we had planned on kind of, repainting and putting in the house. Because again, we were broke and couldn't afford furniture. And we're like, we'll just redo that. I sold that dresser to try to make some extra cash. And it was just enough that I could race to the ATM, put the cash in the ATM to try to get our account back in the positive, so that then I could pay the, electric bill or something. And I just remember being so ashamed in that moment, because it was just like, man, I'm not doing what I promised I would do. Like, I'm not taking care of us. I'm not, the business isn't really, clicking or taking off because I wasn't doing everything I could be doing to get the business to take off. So that was the first one. I remember feeling like I never want to feel this way again. I never want to be in this situation again.
And let me ask you this. Was Maggie aware of that happening?
No, not at the time. Yeah, I was, I'm going to, and it wasn't like this secret of like, I'm not going to tell her. It was just like, I don't want her stressed even
don't want to
more
put that
about
pressure
this.
on her. Yeah.
And I didn't feel like I was doing something dishonest of like, well, I'll just put on a credit card and won't tell her. It was like, no, I'm just going to find a way to get the cash.
Yeah.
And I think too, like, as much of that that's not a winning story, but it was also like, I really felt like I would, at the end of the day, do whatever I had to do to keep us surviving, so that we could keep the business going.
Yeah.
Like, I wasn't going to quit and go, well, man, it'd be a lot easier if I just had a W-2 and got paid every 2 weeks. It was like, man, I just got to figure out a way to keep paying the bills while we get this built up. So,
well, and not to cut you off, Tan, but I think what you just said is gold, right? So many people, they have this journey to open a business, and it seems like so many times they have a back door. And when you said like, no, I'm just going to get it done, I think that itself is a huge, test of your success, right? I'm going to make this happen. And so, man, kudos to you, right?
Yeah.
So,
well, I talked to guys that, I saw that they were making it work, and I was picking their brain, and, I had all the notes, so to speak. So it wasn't a question of like, I don't know, is this feasible? Will this be, profitable? I had tons of examples of it. And so I just knew that like the variable's me. And so if I'm not making it work right now, and I have all the other kind of pieces I need, then it's like, okay, well, then I need to be the change factor. Like, I've got to change myself.
Okay, listen, I'm going to ask you to run with that for a second. We are in a society that, I guess to be blunt, it's very much a victim-based approach. And could you just take what you said and say, no, the issue is me. For a new entrepreneur, if there's a new entrepreneur listening to this and they're trying to get it going, and maybe I haven't accepted that yet. Well, no, I haven't been given the proper resources. I don't have the proper training, whatever it may be. Could you run with that for a second? But no, the issue is I had to address me first before I was going to, fix my situation.
Man, I just finished reading a book for the second time. It's called The Obstacle's the Way by Ryan Holiday. And it's kind of unpacking Greek philosophy and Stoicism. And the whole like tenet of Stoicism philosophy is just that you can't change anything in the outside world or other people. The only thing you can change and control is yourself.
Wow.
And it talks about how really freeing that is. And so and it has all these, one-liners and different little, ideas within it of, the problem is not the event. The problem is your opinion of the event. And so it just little things like that where I was constantly just trying to either listen to people or read things or be around people that I felt like that was, if not like their natural default mindset, because I don't think really that's no one's natural mindset, but that was what they were attempting to become, is that's the way they were thinking. And then just I'm a logic guy overall. Like just in my better moments of kind of sterile thinking, just if you draw a T chart on a piece of paper, you get more benefits from taking ownership and responsibility and not blaming other people than trying to blame other people.
Wow.
I mean, it's selfishly helping you more to go. It doesn't matter if I wasn't offered, certain help, or I didn't have certain advantages, or this didn't come, easily. For what, none of that matters. What matters is how I respond to it and how I can end up kind of overcoming it and coming through it.
I love that quote. Wait, sorry.
It's not the event that's the problem.
It's the opinion of the event. Wow, that's money, Tan.
Yeah,
So
it's perception.
So let me ask this: as you begin this journey, you probably face some unexpected hurdles, right? And I'll maybe even receive some unexpected blessings. Could you talk us through that? Unexpected hurdles or blessings?
Yeah, I would say a big hurdle, which it felt like a hurdle at the time for so long, and I think it ended up kind of being part of the blessing too. But this took way longer than I thought it was going to take, and like that's one of my favorite things to tell people now is like, I guarantee you this will take longer than you think it's supposed to take. I mean, like guarantee. I've never met anybody who was shocked that it happened faster than they thought it was.
Yeah.
Even people who are from the outside, you go, that happened fast for them. If you ask them, they're still like, oh no, I'm half as far as I thought. I mean, there's never a situation where it happens exactly like you thought it was going to timeline wise. I mean, we like languished for years. Just, I mean, the underbelly of mediocrity and felt like we couldn't figure anything out. And, looking back at that time, I mean, I even told this to Maggie a few days ago. One of the biggest blessings was that it took us as long as it did, because I really kind of feel like it helped us develop our character. And I don't really feel like we didn't change a lot. Like, I don't feel like who we are has changed a lot, but I really feel like we changed so much by getting to work on becoming better versions of ourselves. And so that's part of the blessing in it, is just how long it took was, the obstacle and the blessing. I would say the other big blessing, and I've told people this before, we did a conversation before where I was just getting feedback from different people, and we were kind of going around the room, and each person telling the other person some of their strengths and some of their blind spots, and so it's 8 or 9 people, and each person's getting feedback from 8 or 9 other people, and what I noticed without exception, the theme of my criticism I was getting was, you're not open to other people's ideas, and you're terrified of conflict. And I had been told that, on occasion over the previous, 5 or 6 years that we've been trying to get things going. But to have 9 people tell you at once in an hour,
it's eye-opening, right?
Yeah, it's irrefutable. And these were all different people with different personalities. So if you hear from one person, it's easy to go, well, that's because your personality is different, so you just think that about me. When it's 8 or 9 people, all with very different personalities themselves, telling you that. And by the way, they had all kind of, they had taken their notes about my strength and weaknesses prior to, everyone sharing. So it's not like they go, oh yeah, I heard that person say it about you. And they had all come to the same conclusion separately, that was one of my big issues. And again, just kind of, I'm grateful that in that moment I had done enough growing to go, okay, then that's my problem. It's not their problem. They feel that way about me. That's something that I can work on changing. And not because, oh, well, I need to, make them like me more, so I should change. It was going, man, I'm getting, feedback from people who care about me and know me well. And if they're saying that they can see that this hinders my life sometimes and my business sometimes, it's in my best interest to work on this. And fear and conflict has probably been the single greatest, challenge I've sought to overcome in my life over the last, that's been probably 3 or 4 years now. Yeah. And, it's changed my life in some ways. I feel like it's improved, my marriage some. I feel like it's changed, my business and some of the relationships I have with people on our team tremendously. And one of the things I've shared with people before is, when you kind of find out, at some point you have kind of a mirror moment where you're like, this is something I have to address. And I really believe that when people do the hard work to address that flaw, usually whatever their natural gifting is too, makes them actually pretty good at that flaw when they work on it. At least I know that was the case for me, and I know other people where, maybe they're total opposite. They're confrontational naturally, and they worked on starting to
backing off a little bit
or addressing conflict. And then they're really good at compassion, and they're still good at the conflict. And so I felt like over time, I've gotten good at conflict because some of my gifts and my effort I put into addressing conflict and confrontation the right way has made me good at it in certain settings.
Wow.
So I'd say that's one of the bigger blessings that we've had, is just being able to work on that stuff over time.
It's fascinating to hear you talk about that, Tan, and we talk so much about people that pursue. We are naturally built to pursue comfort.
Mm-hmm.
We're naturally built to embrace and enjoy comfort. And we talk about, hey, the discomfort of pursuing a career or discomfort of the unknown of having children. But to really hit on what you're saying, the discomfort in pursuing the fix of the comfort that you get stuck in about the person you are, and saying, okay, I've got to identify and become uncomfortable in addressing these flaws I have that are keeping where I'm at, right? And so let me ask this, because this is sort of off topic here, but you mentioned just that season where it was longer than you thought, right? And that's a tough period, right? That's a tough season. And we expect it to be over, and our brain, we go and go, okay, I'm prepared to struggle for 12 months or 18 months or whatever it may be. We walk in these journeys with these preconceived notions. What do you say to that person that is in smack dab in the middle of that struggle right now?
Yeah,
they're watching, they're listening, they're getting the business up and running, and it's just not working, and they're depleted, they're emotionally exhausted, but they have that fortitude to say, no, I'm going to keep going. But how do you keep them in the fight? How do you keep them moving forward? What do you say to that person right now?
I think one thing I would say is stop putting time frames on it. Like I've talked about this before with our friend Landon. And Good to Great, and I've actually heard this example talked about in other books and podcasts. It's called the Stockdale paradox. So prisoner of war. I think James Stockdale. He's POW for like years, and they ask him when he gets rescued out, and he was like the highest ranking prisoner of war in this camp. So he kind of becomes the de facto like leader of all these POWs. And they ask him when he gets out, they're like, who made it out and who didn't? Who dies in POW camps and who doesn't? And he goes, oh, that's easy. It's the optimists. And like, what do you mean? He goes, well, in the situation they were in, the optimists, they were delusional. So they would say things like, oh, don't worry, we'll be out by Christmas. Christmas comes and goes. No sweat. They'll have us out by Easter. Easter comes. And over time, those optimists, they stop buying their own BS, and they lose hope. They stop believing themselves, and they stop having like a real hope in the future. It's fake after all, and it just kind of wears them down. And I think one of the best things that I did, even while struggling, is I stopped kind of like looking for the like glimmer of the horizon or the finish line, because then it was like, okay, I can get there and stop. And it was just understanding like I'm just working on myself and on my business so that it continues to grow and get better, so it can be the kind of business and I can be the kind of person who can just keep doing it. And so then it wasn't like, how much longer till I get out of the pool? It was like, what else? What's the next thing I need to do? What's the next, part of, my growth, or what's a deficiency we need to address, or what's an area of concern I can get better at? And so then it was less like looking for the eject all the time. And it was more so, viewing it as a workout, or I've told my team before, it's kind of like physical therapy for your character. Like it's hard, uncomfortable, unrelenting work. But it's those areas that usually need the most strengthening. And so I think that's probably, the one thing I would tell somebody who's in it is like, just like get used to being in it and stop seeking to leave it. I love Alex Hormozy has this thing he talks about where somebody who's in the thick of it. And you're just, you're in emotional turmoil because you're like, this is so hard. And if he asks you, he goes, did you expect it to be hard when you started a business? And they're like, yeah, of course. And he goes, this is what hard feels like. Like, this is what you said going into it, you expected to happen. It just doesn't feel, it feels more than you thought it was going to feel. But this is what, I mean, you ask a woman who's pregnant and hey, you know, when it gets to the time where you're going to deliver the baby, like it's going to hurt for a while. And then in it though, they're like, I didn't know it was going to hurt like this. But then afterwards they go, yeah, no, it hurt, I guess. But like, look at my baby. And then they go do it again. And it's just kind of that same mindset of like, this is what you said you knew you were getting into. Now it's time to kind of put your feet to the fire and like test your mettle, so to speak.
You know, it's a great lesson to learn, Tan, that it's almost, as I'm thinking through it right now, as a young entrepreneur, and tell me if you agree with this, as a young entrepreneur, you almost enter this journey going, as Stephen Covey says, begin with the end in mind. And we think as a young entrepreneur, yeah, my end is to get this done and have this built and then right off in the sunset and enjoy life. Mm-hmm. But the stages of growth you have to go through to achieve the success you want to achieve in business, it sets you up that when that is so, you know, say completed, right on it, but it gets to a point where you go, okay, I'm not done because I've grown into a better person, a better version of myself that's now pursuing better ways to continue growing.
Yeah, there's just new milestones.
It is.
Yeah, it's not as much about I think most people, we get into entrepreneurship because we're like, oh, what can it get me? Like, oh, I'll really like the lifestyle, or it looks so luxurious, or most of us, like we were very wrong in being like, wow, it looks really easy and comfortable. And then you learn like, oh no, it's actually like 80% of the time and 80% of the journey, it's way harder and way worse than having a job. And you probably for a lot of that time got paid way less and you worked way more and you hated 80% of, but then at the same time, it's like all this terrible, sick joy you get at the same time doing it.
That's right.
It's just, it's grueling work and it's mentally exhausting. But when you get over the first time you have any sort of distance to look back on and go, oh, I just went through that. And now I'm a little bit, that's kind of what keeps you in, I think, as an entrepreneur. It's not even like the hits of like, we have accomplished success. It's even just the first time you have enough timeline to look back and enough track record to look back and go, oh, I made it through that. I bet I can make it through
That's
more.
Right.
And oh, I've already come this far. I bet I can go even further.
That's right. You know, we've said it and heard it said many times, but in really just entrepreneurship as a whole, you know, it's not about making $1 million a year. It's about what? The person you become in the process, mm-hmm. right? And so I think that's speaking to what you're going through. So as we start to wrap this up, let me ask this, because I think, you know, regardless of what people believe, we can all agree that the Bible is full of leadership lessons. Yeah. The parables that Jesus used and just the lessons can be pulled out of his word. If I said, hey, do you have a certain parable or a certain story that you can relate to or that you use on this journey, do you have anything you share with there?
Yeah, I was thinking about this. I really like the story of Gideon in the Old Testament. Kind of Cliff Notes version. Angel appears to him, and they're like, hey, and I think they're like, mighty warrior of God. And he's kind of like, me? And they're like, you've been chosen. He's basically like, I am from the smallest village of the smallest tribe, and I'm the smallest guy in that smallest village of the smallest tribe. He's like, I'm literally the most unqualified person in this 1 million person nation. And they were just like, it doesn't matter. And so he is so, like the doubting Thomas, with Jesus, he is like maybe the most profound example of that in the Old Testament, where he's like, I don't buy it. And he goes, if you can prove it to me, then Lord, I'll follow your command. And so he basically goes, hey, I'm going to set out this sheep's fleece outside. And if the whole ground is dry, but the fleece is wet, I'll believe it. And so he goes to bed, lays the fleece out, comes back the next day. Ground is dry, there's no dew, but the fleece is soaking wet, and he squeezes it, and the water comes out. And then but that's not enough. He goes, okay, I get it, but just to make sure, like, I can be certain. I just love this, because he goes, now flip it, basically. He goes, I'll put the fleece back out, and if all of the ground is wet, but the fleece is dry, I'll know it's, really, I really am called. And, of course, comes out, and ground's wet, and he squeezes the fleece, and it's dry. I just love that idea of, one, like we're all called, like whatever your journey, if you really believe that I'm doing this extra hard thing that is less convenient. It's not, traditional. And I'm going for it. I'm trying to really make it for myself as an entrepreneur. And you feel like you're really called that way, then one, it doesn't matter if you're qualified yet. You're going to pick up the qualifications and you're going to be, given the strength and the blessings,
That's right.
by who called you.
What is it? God doesn't call the qualified; He qualifies the called.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then I also just love that part of that story. And I've said this to myself like in my head before, like just squeeze the fleece. And what I kind of mean to myself when I'm saying it is, you already have proof.
Oh, that's good. Tim.
Like if you just stop and look around, like you already have certain experiences that have happened, or conversations, or lessons you've learned, or things that you uniquely went through that maybe even at the time were hard and bad, but like, if you really squeeze out the evidence of your life already, you already have the proof that you're called to where you need to go. And so,
that's
like,
good,
I've just like written in my journal before, like, just squeeze the fleece. Like, you already have the evidence that where you're going is where you're called to go.
Dang, that's good stuff, Dan. So, hey, as we wrap up the episode, and you can put a bow on it here. How do you want to be remembered?
Man, I'm reading this book right now called Habits of the Household by Justin Whitley, who I think is an Enneagram 9 as I read it. So I'm really vibing with the guy. But one of the things he literally just said in the chapter I finished is one of the main goals of parenthood is that your children eventually return as your friends. And I've just been thinking a lot about that. I mean, I've got a 3-year-old son, and we've got a daughter due this summer. But I feel like my family is kind of, we're kind of getting that stage where like my siblings and, their kids and our kids and my parents, like we're friends now. Like we enjoy being around each other. And I just think like, man, I want that same kind of legacy, and not even just with my kids, but I feel this way about the people that, we're building the business with and stuff like that, just getting to watch kind of the accomplishments they're starting to have and all these same things, the character development and stuff like that, where I want to be able to look back and, them kind of look ahead after I'm gone and just be like, man, we accomplished some amazing things, but we did it like, not just as friends, like we were nice to each other, but like that, like our hearts were like bound together. And we're stronger together because of it. And that that I played a role in that I was, so again, as an Enneagram 9, as a peacekeeper, I'm naturally a mediator, counselor, but also I want to be remembered that I was brave enough to like be willing to get uncomfortable. And sometimes that means I'm the one leading the fight, and I'm the one, having hard conversations, and I'm the one challenging the status quo. Because my hope is that, as my family remembers me, or as, people on our team remember me, is that like, that's what really made the most change. Is not that I like, Tanner was a nice guy because he was naturally a nice guy. But the times where they go, man, I know he was screaming on the inside because he hates, doing conflict, or because he wanted to see if it would resolve the issue on its own. But that like he was willing to, sometimes wage the war, fight the battle, have the tough convo because it made the difference for all of us. And so
that's great.
I would say that's it.
Well, listen, in you've heard me say this before, but I've watched your business journey over the last so many years, and it's inspiring. But man, the man you are, dude, the husband you are, the father you are, that's true inspiration, man. And dude, I've been moved, literally tears over the last few years, and just seeing the walk you walk and the life you lead. So proud of you, bro. I love you, man. I'm grateful for you. Appreciate you on the episode.
Yeah.
So, hey, thanks for joining us on this episode of The Called Entrepreneur, a podcast dedicated to helping faithful men and women make the transition from employee to entrepreneur while keeping a Matthew 6:33 mindset. If this episode resonated with you, we'd love to hear your story and connect with you. Follow us at Instagram summit_HQ. Send us your story and forward this episode to someone that may need the encouragement that hopefully you received today. Come back to us next time as we learn to seek the kingdom as we build businesses.